And as we begin to venture further, Andrea, would you begin for us?
As we have frequently emphasized, Master Dwalkool states, I cannot too strongly reiterate the constant necessity for you to think in terms of energies and forces, of lines of force and energy relationships, vibration, light, sound, color, rotation, movement of the fires. As we seek to stand in spiritual being within the fire of mind.
Let's pause here and each of us consider in our groups and in this group, are we becoming more aware, particularly in Gemini, of the interplay of these energies and forces, the lines of force and the energy relationships? Is there an experience that you have had recently in Gemini that speaks to this developing ability to flow in terms of the energies and forces, even in times when they are seemingly contradictory? And if so, would you be willing to share that experience? I'll share an experience that I had in the last few days of being with a group of spiritual teachers and students, in which there was a reference to a particular gathering and particular effort of that the group, with some of the members present and many from other places. And in their speaking about their experience and their noticing and what they learned, my experience was of the vibration and the sound, actually, of the energies within that environment that they were part of on the etheric physical plane, and the way in which groups are coming together on that plane in a kind of a telepathic rapport that seems to me to be developing across what used to be lines of separation. Donna.
Okay. For applicants, for disciples and initiates, and then the process. For applicants, listen, know, experiment, touch, express, expectation, see, reveal, experience. Apply, destroy, examination. Know, resurrect, exaltation, which produces a final exit. Words such as these are synthetic symbols, conveying a cosmic story in terms of constructive brevity. And further to the left, initiation is, in the last analysis, reception of a series of revelations. Initiation, human and solar.
Sorry,
Do you want me to read? No.
This let's just look at, because we've gone through it before and we want to go through these rather clearly. I think the point is for us as we move into the festival is to realize that the third eye is an energy center and that this third eye is constructed by man, by humanity. And this third eye is the distributor of soul energy. And it develops out of this interplay of the Ajna Centre, right eye and left eye. The right eye, the agent of force, and the left eye, the agent of the mental force and lower mind being spiritualized. And the other note is that we are told that humanity is now the throat center and solar plexus center. It's in, given two different centers in the teachings, but the new group of world servers is the third eye. And that is the distributing center for soul energy. So I've included some particular teachings this that we'll get to. This is just a way we described last time this progression where we learn that the word is not the thing. And I think many people struggle with this because we hear words, we read words, we meditate, and we develop visualizations and experiences. And these then become ideas, actually, that develop out of an astral experience that are reflected in our concrete mind. And we work for decades and lives to raise these up so that we can discriminate and find those, the essence, the thought, we use archetypes, but over time, we have to employ self-forgetfulness, harmlessness, and right application of divine ideas in order to develop that soul consciousness on the higher mental plane. That does lead to the true intuition and revelation. So one of the things I offered from my own experience over many years, this box of green, and the things, and I just mentioned them last time, so I decided I'd put them in here for us. So you can reflect on this in terms of higher levels. For in my experience, and I hear it over and over again, we tend to want to think of these states as static, and they are constantly changing and evolving as individuals and even as groups. So let's try to remember that any skill or attribute develops from this lowest state, where in terminology that's used in teaching and training, you have unconscious incompetence. You're very awkward at first. And as I listened to the groups talking about recent group experiences, and they noted some in the group who were, from their rendering, at a point in relation to some of the things that were shared, kind of awkward, or even in another way, phony, a conscious incompetence in the way they were rendering it back to the group. And it was emanating out. So one of the things is to recognize that we are all there at some point, whatever stage we're in, that's our next stage, we are there. If it's the whatever initiation you go through this process, you may come to that point of the highest, which is over here stated as the unconscious competent, where you are automatically, spontaneously effective and efficient. You have reached the point where you're merging into the next level of consciousness. So I think for me, it's a way to describe this cyclical, observable process that occurs as a progression in, you can call it continuity of consciousness, you can call it the initiatory process, you can call it the stages of revelation, but it is a series of emergence, and to be able to hold soul control at the stage that you are in this progression. So we've had this slide before, but I don't know that we've ever talked about it as this path from instinct to intellect, from mass consciousness to individual consciousness, and from intellect to intuition, soul consciousness, through illumination to group consciousness, which is where most of us are attempting to live and move and have our being. And we know that there are stages far beyond in terms of triadal consciousness and systemic consciousness and cosmic consciousness. But for most of us, it's these first stages that are where we are, and noticing, as we do when you look out into humanity, how these, I'll go back, how humanity, in adjusting and adapting to discrimination even, so many people are exhibiting what is kind of an unconscious incompetence in relation to what's happening in the world. And you can hear others who will make statements that are just kind of phony. It's a conscious incompetence. They're struggling to find the words to describe what they think needs to be done. So as we're studying these higher teachings, I just want to encourage everyone to hold these, what are spiralic processes, and to utilize visualization, as we're told, is the key for energy follows thoughts. And this slide, I'm sure you've read many of times, but particularly those who've been in the healing practice, this focus on this midway point between the pituitary body and the pineal gland is where we learn to draw. It is where we learn to describe our desires and that for which we intend to work. And that many of us are really working through this visualization process, thus the use of visualizations in our work together, to create this directed process that will develop around the pineal gland, so that it eventually becomes this magnetic field. And at a certain point, as one moves toward the third initiation and then passes the third and into the fourth, it truly becomes a magnetic field that we can gather energy into and use and fully direct toward that magnetic point of the hierarchy. And some in our groups, I'm sure, are really close to or are in a place in their own development that they're truly approaching that third initiation. And we are blessed to have them in our presence and to work in group with them. So keep working to create your own individual. This was something I put together because I wanted to describe the movement that is occurring, not just the vibration, not just the light, not just the sound, not just the colors and how those colors shift and change, but this movement and how we begin to understand how that then we project into. So this was another of the references that we have used before, giving us this progression as the physical eye develops, helps us develop the third eye. And what DK tells us, we move through and into. So let's read this into the record. Ben, would you read for us, please?
We experience progression in the development of vision and the ability to see spiritual light. Just as the physical eye came into being in response to the light of the sun, so the spiritual eye, also called the third eye, equally comes into being in response to the light of the spiritual sun. As the aspirant develops, he becomes aware of the light. I refer to the light in all forms, veiled by all sheaths and expressions of the divine life, not just to the light within the aspirant himself. As his awareness of this light increases, so does the apparatus of vision develop, and the mechanism whereby he can see things in the spiritual light comes into being in the etheric body.
So pause and just consider how this is developed in your own being and how it has been aided and expanded in group formation. And that might be any group. For some, that light may expand in an experience in what one may call a typical spiritual setting, a church kind of setting. Others, it may be in actually learning in a group setting and meditating in relation to the opening of the column of light within ourselves and noticing the light within a particular center within our own being and how that light then can be directed to a higher center and then to a triangle. You may have had an experience of this light in relation to using the superimposed triangles. you could have had an experience when you went to a particular seminar or conference or groups gathering where you literally looked and saw someone you had not previously met or known their name, and you could instantaneously see a light that was a connection for your light. We have these experiences in all forms throughout our life, and it's to note and always move to that higher light. So that's where we closed. Let's continue our exploration of ideas, ideals, and illusion with that in mind. That today, find something in DK's teachings or in what is shared with our groups that allows you to see and imagine your experience and the group experience at the full moon of Gemini. An experience that is real, an experience that is not just recognized, but realized as an affirmation of where you are in relation to service to humanity and the path that we are all on to assist hierarchy in the implementation of the plan. Endeavor to find that line, that word, the sounding, that recognition in your own being, and carry that through the days of preparation. As you listen to the last sermon of the Buddha, as if spoken by the Christ, on the first keynote, resurrection from the physical. On the second note, love on the astral. And the third note, contact on the mental plane. So some of us have been investigating and experimenting with AI, and we're learning and we're also cautious, but this may be something that would bear repeating. Ellen, would you read this for us, please?
Alice Bailey, through Master DK, teaches that revelation is a gradual unfolding process in spiritual development, not a sudden event. Bailey emphasizes that revelation is both a personal and group process, often catalyzed by collective spiritual striving, and ultimately serves to bring higher truths into practical expression in the world. Revelation is experienced as a series of expanding insights, moving from understanding the material world to ideals, to the soul, and finally to the nature of divinity and unity. Revelation leads to increasing light and awareness, culminating in the recognition of non-separateness and the alignment of individual will with divine will. These revelations are stepping stones in the initiatory process, with each initiation unveiling deeper truths about the self, the soul, and the divine plan. The first major revelation is the recognition of the presence, the realization of one's true immortal self and its oneness with all life. And this is at the third initiation. This experience brings about a direct, undeniable knowledge of the inner divine reality, transforming faith into certainty and revealing the factual basis of spiritual brotherhood. The second revelation is the vision, the understanding of one's role in the greater spiritual plan, both individually and as part of a group or ray. And this occurs at the fourth initiation.
Reflecting on this summary, I was thinking about words from Michael Robbins when we were studying over the many years and many times the rays and initiations and initiation itself, in his comment. If you think you've passed an initiation, just knock yourself down a couple of steps because these major initiations are so transformative. And if one thinks about the levels beyond the fourth, and we think about this great presence in the body of, or in the, under the name of the Christic principle that is at the point between the sixth and seventh initiations, how far we have to go, and yet to know we are unified in this process gives one a sense of aspiration, inspiration, and a desire to continuously assert toward the higher. Margie.
Let us sound together as one group the mantram of the disciples' degree. May the energy of the divine self inspire us, and the light of the soul direct. May we be led from darkness to light, from the unreal to the real, from death to immortality. We enter into the stage of recognition very rapidly, holding the consciousness steadily in the mind. We recognize our pledged discipleship. We recognize our equipment, gratefully rendered. We recognize our achieved alignment. We recognize the soul, the source of love, wisdom. We recognize the hierarchy.
The mantra
Mantra.
of unification. The souls of all are one, and we are one with them. We seek to love, not hate. We seek to serve and not exact due service. We seek to heal, not hurt. Let pain bring due reward of light and love. Let the soul control the outer form and life and all events, and bring to light the love that underlies the happenings of the time. Let vision come and insight. Let the future stand revealed. Let inner union demonstrate and outer cleavages be gone. Let love prevail. Let all people love.
Mary Gale.
From the Treatise on White Magic. D. Finally, the light in the head is indicative of the finding of the path, and there remains then for the man to study and understand the techniques whereby the light is centralized, intensified, entered, and eventually becomes that magnetic line, like unto a spider's thread, which can be followed back until the source of the lower manifestation is reached and the soul consciousness is entered. The above language is symbolic and yet vitally accurate, but it is expressed thus in order to convey information to those who know and protect those who as yet know not. The path of the just is as a shining light, and yet at the same time, a man has to become that path itself. He enters the light and becomes the light, and functions then as a lamp set in a dark place, carrying illumination to others and lighting the way before them.
Let us pause now for you to offer any thoughts that you have in relation to these teachings. And ask if someone would like to read this next slide for us.
I'm happy to read. With the theme of light, of vision, and of illumination, Master Dwalkul seeks not here to deal. I have covered these subjects at length in the books which I have written, and they have also constituted the earnest search of the mystics of all time, and also the scriptures and the literature of all nations give much information. It is the subject of revelation and the task of the initiate to reveal with which I am concerned. The disciple, who represents the ashram, must reveal to humanity the essential unity underlying all creation. This is done, first of all, by acting like a clear sheet of glass through which all may see the reality of oneness, as it demonstrates in practicing operation. When he has, through his own life and words, demonstrated his conscious participation in this basic unity, he passes on to practice ashramic methods of making this fundamental truth still more apparent.
So when I read this, it occurred to me that this for me is a revelation about the accomplishment of the first 3 initiations. And one has passed the 4th, this acting like a clear sheet of glass through which all may see the reality of oneness, is that which occurs at the 4th initiation in its first stage, and then is gradually increased at each subsequent revelation. One of the reasons I thought back to some teaching that I think it's either in Cosmic, maybe in Treatise on White Magic, where DK says that, maybe it's in Esoteric Astrology, the next 1,000 years, the Christ is to clear the astral plane. And that would be to clear the astral plane so that it is that sheet of glass that humanity can move from being identified on the astral plane to being identified on the mental plane. That was just something that occurred to me when I read this particular passage in the Rays and the Initiations. And I am anxious if anyone has a different interpretation. But there was another passage in Externalization of the Hierarchy where DK talks about the second sentence of the final dispensation of the Great Invocation, from the point of love within the heart of God, which then he goes on to explain is Christ. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men, and that is Christ clearing the astral field of humanity. May Christ return to earth. That was DK's explanation of that second sentence. And I found this quite related in my own pondering and contemplation of our goal to be this clear sheet of glass. Catherine.
You can here see why, as a hierarchical technique, we brought to the attention of the general public the fact of the existence of the new group of world servers. They offer a practical expression of an existent unity based upon oneness of motive, of recognition, of orientation towards the spiritual world and towards the service of humanity, of methods and of ideas, and all this in spite of the fact that the physical plane relationship is usually non-existent and outer organization and recognition lack. The unity is subjective, and for that reason is impervious to every taint of separateness from the Raisin initiations.
Would you continue?
The inner organization, to which we have given the name of the new group of world servers, for the sake of recognition and identification, cannot be broken or in any way diminished, for it is constructed around a major principle of evolutionary growth, which, when attained, indicates a registered consciousness of unity. This is something which, once recorded and known, cannot be lost or disproved. Once seen and realized, it becomes as much a fact in its possessor's consciousness as the recognition and utilization of his own physical body. This he knows to be a complex organism which constitutes a functioning unity through the medium of the life principle. It is an incontrovertible fact in the realization of the intelligent man from the Raisin initiations.
What are our thoughts about this? The recognition of the new group as a subjective unit, the Ajna Centre, the developing spiritual eye, with a registered consciousness of unity.
I'm struck by the importance of this concept that it cannot be broken or in any way diminished, cannot be lost or disproved, this unity, because what we're seeing in the world is disunity, separation, and that's, of course, the battle of the dark forces and the forces of light. It's quite something to read that the unity of the new group of world servers, because it's already established, cannot be broken or in any way diminished. That's our strength at this time and our responsibility to the group and for humanity. To be the way and show the way and be the way for those experiencing separativeness and confusion. This is a powerful statement at this time.
And something that we can hold in concert in that symphony of sound that emerges from this great column channel of light that is the Antakarana. For in the new group, there's a representation of all the rays active at this time, working. I found this so important in my own practice of continuously recognizing every group and, meditatively aligning, orienting to all groups, all beacons of light, all active servers in this unbroken, undiminished unity.
And to speak a little bit further to that, exactly this consciousness of unity, especially with how the internet and everything works with all the podcasts and YouTubes and everything, we're beginning to see how there are so many of us are unified. And just a tiny little example of my own life, when Joe was speaking about the stanzas of love, I had been pondering that myself actually last night and was thinking the same thing about the Christ and the love. And so there we're all connected. Over.
I'm reminded of what's actually decades ago now when a group of us first started were part of an online process of study of the rays and the initiations. That if we were to report, of course, on our study and our meditation, and if one could not, the demand was that one would always reply in an email, "I am with you," just acknowledging that, we are one in our meditative processes. We are one in this progression together. And those tests and trials eventually for all of us will result in triumph for the world disciple, humanity. Leading from initiation to initiation, we progress along the antakarana as the soul vehicle moves to the next subplane of the higher mental plane and on to identification on the subplanes of the spiritual triad. So this depiction takes, DK gives us this diagram in the rays and the initiations, which shows the antakarana being developed from the first initiation through the second initiation and the third as a three-pronged. It's got three lines, and then at the third initiation it becomes one and extends to the Christ. So through light, vibration, light, sound, color, motion, we're continuously being drawn into closer relation with the higher or next expansion of consciousness. And we are moving into a period of more and more intensity, of course. So just to remind us again, with a visualization that is used by many, particularly in the healing context of the soul, the solar, the vehicle of the soul, and the personality. My own preference is to try not to use this human configuration for, as DK tells us, these are centers, they're vortices that are come together and create an illusion of a physical form that we often focus too much on. But this is just to integrate our understanding again in these progressions. We're using words that are etheric and physical abstractions that we sound to describe our experience. And eventually we learn that the word is not the thing, just as we learned that the body is not the thing. As Roberto Assagioli says, I have a body, I am not my body. I have emotions, I am not my emotions. And these ideas form from our astral experience, and then they're reflected by the concrete mind as statements of ideals that come from the highest level of the astral plane. And then fourth, these conscious concepts are examined using our discrimination, that fourth subplane of the mental plane. And it's at that point that we create our archetypes, which then we can visualize, always remembering with those archetypes, we're acting as if, for energy follows thought, and developing soul consciousness on the higher mental plane, eventually to achieve identification with the soul on the Buddhic plane and true intuition. So what covers the progressions of revelation, the progressions of initiations, the progressions of continuity of consciousness, levels of awareness or stages or paths, is that experience with aspiration simultaneously, continuously evolving, expanding, receiving flashes of intuition, which we register as impressions, as ideas, as inspiration. And for all of us, that we might stand as the new group of world servers on that subjective level with all the active workers, all those who have passed to the other side, and those yet to be born. The new group of world servers stand together as one, as the developing spiritual eye to receive at the Gemini Full Moon Festival, the Festival of Humanity. Sometimes we worry about or are concerned or spend time thinking about the stage we are in discipleship. I think at this time, it's time to just say we are disciples and recognize our discipleship as one, as a unity with all stages of discipleship in the new group. And move beyond these many sets of words. And DK gives us these words, usually with alliteration: respond, recognize, reveal, rent, realization, reality. He gives us these like stepping stones to the higher levels. And they do help us as we move toward the fourth initiation, when the petals of sacrifice unfold, the petals of synthesis begin to unfold fully, and the sacred sacrificial aspect of life, DK says, is revealed in its beauty, purity, simplicity, and in its revolutionizing quality. We all start at a point of a transient, momentary variation in vibration, current, voltage, or frequency that is not lasting, not permanent, and not enduring. And yet, he tells us in the rules for disciples and initiates to remember. So let us prepare to remember in our stance together as the new group at the festival time, at the time of the full moon. This momentary or many moments, the variation we receive in vibration, in current, voltage, or frequency, as vibration, as light, as sound, as color, as movement or visualization. Though it may not be lasting, it may not be permanent, remember that flash, that insight in that unified state. And let's not worry about how we clothe the ideas that we receive. Andrea, would you read this for us, please?
Master Dwell Cool on how words clothe ideas. All that is possible for me is to grope for those feeble words which will somewhat clothe the thought. As they clothe it, they limit it, and I am guilty of creating new prisoners who must ultimately be released. All books are prison houses of ideas, and only when speech and writing are superseded by telepathic communication and by intuitive interplay will the plan and the technique of its expression be grasped in a clearer fashion. I talk now in symbols. I manipulate words in order to create a certain impression. I construct a thought form which, when dynamic enough, can impress the brain of a transmitting agent, such as yourself. But as I do so, I know well how much must be left unrelated and how seldom it is possible to do more than point out a cosmology, macrocosmic or microcosmic, which will suffice to convey a temporary picture of divine reality.
And so we must not apologize in any fashion for the words that we are forced to use, because we are, as DK says, groping for words to clothe the thought, to clothe the idea, to clothe our rendering and expression of an experience. And let us always listen beyond to each other for the essence that substands our experience together. Use the images, the vision that works for you. Know thyself by knowing the ray influences and not being locked into a particular point in your own becoming, but just recognize that which is dominating at a particular point in your experience and utilize the strengths. Clothe the self with the virtues of the ray or the rays that are operating in the individual self, personality, and soul, the group self, personality, and soul. Always keeping in mind this purity of the relationship that we find in this science of the rays. Conduct your own personal assessment of the ray that you want to choose to bring forth in this next cycle as we move forth in 2025. Allow the process in your own meditative state, in your own contemplative state, and let it resonate into your group work, whether it is action on the physical plane, meditation and dissipation of glamours, or the dispelling of illusion on the astral and mental planes, or if it is the ray virtue that is bringing you into deep unity with the new group of world servers. The secret, as DK says, is the secret of translation. The effect of continued aspiration, when followed by right action, brings about three things: stimulating the higher atoms of the three bodies, allowing us to discard those atomic substances which bring us and hold us down to earth, and the increasing of the magnetic attractive power of the higher atoms, which draw to themselves atoms of higher vibration to take the place of those of low vibration. The atoms of high vibration are attracted into a body or bodies by the power of the united attraction of the atoms already present, and not merely, primarily by the will of the soul. So we are attracted into the body of the new group of world servers through the presence of the higher atoms in our three bodies. Through service, through meditation, through study, we develop this whole personality, elevated through the power of aspiration, working with this secret of translation, this mystery. From the highest point of soul focus, with the attitude of the observer, we say together, I am the soul, I am light divine, I am love, I am will, I am fixed design. Then, to assist in alignment with the higher incoming energies, we utilize the higher triangles. And at the point of time for the Gemini festival, we attune to the 5 planetary centers: London, Geneva, Darjeeling, New York, and Tokyo, bringing through the energies that are being sent through from the Christ and the hierarchy to humanity. Will, love, and creative intellect, creative intelligence. These energies have come through to the Christ from the much higher dimensions, transcending, transmitting, transforming through the sun, transfiguring through the 7 sacred planets, and then through the non-sacred planets to the earth, the secret of translation, the elevating power of aspiration to the earth, where we receive and are able to transmute the lower to the higher. So at the time of the Christ festival, consider these descending energies into the planetary inlets on the energy of the will, bringing humanity into relationship with the divine ideals on all of the rays that are the foundation of the plan being transmitted through the hierarchy to a waiting and receptive new group of world servers and into the brain of the planetary logos, humanity. We align we visualize the omnipresence of divinity within all forms pours in upon the consciousness of the initiate, and the mystery of time, space, and electricity stands revealed. The major effect of this revelation prior to the third initiation is to bring us a realization of the great heresy of separativeness, as it focuses in us the separated, fully conscious individual, aware of the past, conscious now of the ray and its conditioning power, focused in our own aspiration, and yet part of the great whole of nature. Let's continue to prepare together and bring into our consciousness as much as possible, but find that one thought, that one point, idea that came today as we've considered these teachings together, and hold it in your consciousness in the light of the Gemini full moon.